Good Monday morning, and thanks for listening to my musing this Labor Day, and that's what I've been thinking about. Labor. The first Labor Day was in the 19th century in New York City, and it was organized by the Central Labor Union. It was a celebration of workers, their dignity, their value. In the Gilded Age, when workers could be taken advantage of, this was a celebration of the rights that workers had earned. I mean, they even pushed for their own holiday, 5-day work week, 40-hour week, child protection. All these sorts of things were a celebration of what it meant to give workers dignity, honor, and protection. And for those reasons, we celebrate labor. The labor movement didn't come necessarily out of the church. We don't think about unions in the same way in the 21st century as we did in the 19th. But even before the creation of Labor Day, the dignity of work and its place in relationship to the life of faith has always been something that was important. Why did God create Adam and Eve? We read in Genesis 2 that someone needed to work the garden. In Hebrew, the word avodah means work and worship. It is the same word. So this Labor Day, how are we supposed to process our vocations, our callings, what it means for us that God has given us gifts and abilities and people in our lives who help us develop those gifts and abilities for the sake of the work we do? If you didn't get paid, if you didn't need to be paid for the work that you do, what would you wake up wanting to do? What do you do in your free time? How does that sense of fulfillment and purpose blend in to what you do get paid for? How do we understand vocation, calling, work, and the dignity of work in the life of faith? That's what I wonder about. And I have some more history that includes things like the Luddites, Robin Hood, and John Steinbeck and the Grapes of Wrath. So if you're wondering how those things play into how we think on this Labor Day, why don't you listen a little more? What would be a holy job? Before the Reformation, holy jobs were things like ministers or monks. In the ancient world, monks did an awful lot. Maybe you've heard that some even brewed beer. The idea of a holy job, working in a monastery, taking a vow of poverty, was a feudal way of having some security, having a place to live. But it meant things like giving up a family. It also meant that priests, monks, and nuns were the three kinds of holy callings that people could engage. During the Protestant Reformation, with people like Luther and Calvin, they said something different. They said that holy jobs are not limited to jobs within a monastery or in a church, but nearly everything could be a holy calling, a vocation, from the Latin vocare, which means to call. So that if you're a school teacher, a doctor, or a nurse, a tradesperson, a plumber, all of these jobs are ways of serving other people. And if you feel called to serve in that way, then you are answering God's call to be a help to other people, to build a world in which justice, mercy, and service take the lead. How are we supposed to understand that now? What are the things that push against the notion of a holy calling? I'll mention, maybe you could already guess, that not every job, even with Luther and Calvin, was considered a worthy or holy calling. They weren't super supportive of prostitution. In some scenarios, teachers were not considered holy in their work because they taught things that would be unbecoming of a Christian. Examples of that in the past have included military service or education about pagan deities. Soldiering has had a off-and-on relationship within the church. That for the church today, we support those who protect and defend freedom. In the early Roman Empire, before Constantine, soldiers were the ones who crucified Jesus. Why would anyone take up a profession that supported Roman imperialism? And throughout history, the church has taken different positions about soldiering. Beyond the jobs that are holy or not, today, specifically within the Presbyterian Church and the Reformed tradition, you should think of your calling, your job, as something that's holy, where work and worship are two sides of the exact same coin. That worship isn't only what we do on Sunday, because when we go out into the world to be healers, to be educators, to be tradespeople, to help people with their finances, when we work with compassion and grace, these are the things that God has called us, vocare, to do. What are the things that push against that beyond certain job descriptions that don't seem to be quite so holy? Dignity in work is something that has been a part of the Judeo-Christian tradition from the beginning. That work was good in the garden. That's why Adam was there. But work was also a curse. Whenever Adam and Eve are pushed out of the garden, it's by the sweat of their brow, by hard work, by labor pains, in the case of Eve. But those things were punishments. Things that strip jobs of fulfillment or dignity. Those things work against a godly sense of vocation, of calling. We also have a complicated relationship with technology. In the Christian tradition, I don't just mean today where Uber and taxis battle it out. If you know the term Luddite, it generally means someone who is against technology. Maybe someone who doesn't know how to use Google Docs. But that's not where it started. The Luddites were a 15th century organization organized around General Ludd, Ned Ludd, who may or may not have been a real person. In Sherwood Forest, a few hundred years after what might have been an historical Robin Hood, there was a group of weavers who literally had a cottage industry. What do I mean? Outside of their cottage, they would have had sheep. Inside their cottage, they would have spun thread. They would have had barnyard looms. And that was the entirety of the textile industry and economy in England. One of the largest textile producing nations and economies in the world. The first industrial revolution was specifically for weavers. With automated steam-powered looms, hundreds, if not thousands, of cottage industries, households, they were the same thing, were put out of business. They were no longer able to make a living wage, and factories weren't hiring everyone that was laid off from the need to be producing textiles. So what did they do? They raged against the machines. Ned organized these weavers, these families who were offset from new technologies that were affecting the economy, and they raided factories. They broke the machines. And so the English version of the Pinkertons were created to come and defend the factories. It set a division between laborers and owners or landlords so that the dignity of work, what people could wake up to do to earn an honest day's living, was put into question. The people who owned the factories started the first sweatshops so that people were stripped of their dignity, stripped of their creativity, and they were forced to work for low wages. They were put in heavy debt, and those were the things that they were working against. Not because they were lazy, because they wanted to be independent and economically sustainable. That was in the 15th century through that first industrial revolution. We have those same technological problems that you might hear about today. The notion that you would work for a company that had a good pension and that you would work for 30 years and you could support your family from a single breadwinner. Well, that existed for a very short time after World War II, didn't it? That wasn't a part of the Gilded Age of the 20s. That's not a part of many economies or families today. Are there pressures on this Labor Day that push against the dignity and the fulfillment that comes with a holy calling to work? In any profession, I don't find it hard to imagine how people can be a service to one another. Just think, if someone is drunk and you call an Uber, that person gets home safe. Uber drivers in that way could save lives. Whenever you can save a life, but it's not in surge pricing, if you struggle to pay your rent, even if you're a part of a system that helps to save lives, what is due to you for the work that you contribute to the world? How do we compare people like Supreme Court justices to Judge Judy Scheinland if they make 10 times, 100 times more money for being entertainers on television versus something like a Supreme Court justice? Our systems for giving dignity, for bestowing honor, for the work that we do is something that the church should be particularly aware of if we continue to connect calling, divine calling, with work and with worship. Can we put these things together so that from Sunday to Saturday, the notion that we are supposed to be people of service and compassion runs through the entire week? It's not something that stays within the walls of, I would say, the sanctuary. I really mean your Zoom device or your TV. As employers, as employees, as gig workers, I think the holy calling for us is to find some level of fulfillment in the work that we do. That's on us. What we can fight for systemically is that what is due financially, or in terms of vacation, time off, health benefits, those sorts of things, those are due us as a society. Those are things that fall outside of our individual control, but they are within our collective control. Again, the very first Labor Day was organized by a union. Workers joining together to say, these are the things we need for our protection so that we're able to work in safe and helpful and productive ways. I don't have a full history of unions. Really, my only reference to that is John Steinbeck. If you've read The Grapes of Wrath or In Dubious Battle, you know that there have been struggles between workers and landowners, from the Luddites to the 1930s to today. You're entitled to have differences of opinion about unions. But what I hope we could find common ground on is the place for fulfillment and getting what is due to the work that workers do. So on this Labor Day, where we take a reasonable rest from our labor, how do we think and muse about labor more so that it is not only something that we dread on Monday, but that it's something that we do because God has gifted us to do it, because we are trying to build a better, more equitable world where people are able to express their thoughts, their creativity, their imagination in all sorts of venues. That's what I've been musing about. I hope you muse about it too. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.